I wasn't supposed to be at the cabin until Saturday. That was the arrangement had been for years, even after the divorce. We'd split most things clean down the middle, but the Riverside property was still shared on paper, a kind of mutual leftover neither of us had the energy to let go of completely. But even shared spaces came with ground rules. Rule number 1? Always coordinate before showing up. That's why I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary when I pulled into the gravel lot a day early. The plan was simple: prep a canoe for next week's youth retreat, maybe patch the roof vent if I had time. The air was thick with the scent of pine sap and a river not far enough off to mute the occasional rush of water. Familiar sounds. Comfortable ones. Then I heard voices. 2 of them. One of them unmistakably belonged to Leslie. The other was a man's. Deeper, a little rough around the edges, but undeniably relaxed. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was someone who felt at home. I stood still for a moment, the driver's side door still open behind me. A part of me wanted to turn around and leave right then and there. But curiosity, or maybe something darker, had its grip on me. I moved around to the side of the cabin. The boards under my boots didn't creak, and I thanked muscle memory for that. Through the window, behind a screen still half covered with spring pollen, I saw her. Leslie. My ex-wife. She was barefoot, her hair damp, carrying 2 mugs. She wore one of my shirts. Not a coincidence. That shirt hadn't been moved from the cabin wardrobe in over a year. A forest green flannel with sleeves she always used to roll. I stood there and watched her hand a mug to a man sitting comfortably on the porch lounger, legs outstretched, a blanket kicked down near his feet. His hair was messy. Not just slept in messy, in asterisk mately familiar messy. Like it had been touched, a lot, in the last few hours. He grinned at her. She laughed. It was the kind of scene you'd expect on a cozy weekend away. Only this was my cabin, and that was my mug, and that flannel had last touched skin that belonged to a man now standing frozen in disbelief just outside the glass. Leslie turned and saw me. She went stiff, lips parting slightly in surprise before she quickly handed the man his mug and stepped down onto the porch. Barefoot. Her steps were quick, calculated to appear casual. Brandon, she called out with forced cheer, like she'd run into an old friend at the grocery store. I didn't think you were coming up until tomorrow. I didn't answer. She hesitated near the steps, folding her arms across the shirt as if she just realized she was still wearing it. I know we didn't coordinate, she said, tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear, but I thought, well, I didn't think you'd mind. Mind? That was rich? I glanced past her and the man stood up. He didn't offer a wave, didn't smile. Just stood there, watching, expression unreadable. He wasn't embarrassed. That much was clear. And he sure as hell wasn't worried. I was just showing Bryce the upgrades you did last fall, she added quickly, a little breathless now. He's into that sort of thing. You know, cedar work and all. Bryce. That name hit me like the creak of a step I should have replaced months ago. Bryce, the former tax advisor. The one who used to linger a bit too long during meetings. The one whose name Leslie dropped offhandedly just enough times to stick. I stared at her. Her face, for all its carefully arranged expression, couldn't hide the blush rising from her chest to her cheeks. Her mouth moved again, words about borrowing space, about innocent timing, about how nothing was going on. But I wasn't listening. Behind her, the mug she'd handed Bryce sat on the porch railing, steam still curling from the lip. The blanket had been slept in, creased in a way no folded throw should be. Her towel was draped over a railing near the outdoor shower. The air still smelled faintly like citrus shampoo. The kind she started using after we separated. I stepped past her without a word. She moved aside, giving me just enough space like she knew not to push. I entered the workshop, retrieved my keys from the pegboard just inside, and turned around. She stood at the doorway now, arms crossed, looking both small and somehow defiant. Brandon, please don't be like this. I didn't answer. I shut the door behind me, keys clenched tight, and walked back to my truck. As I backed out of the gravel lot, I saw her reflection in the side mirror, standing there, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other tugging at the shirt sleeve like she wanted to disappear inside it. I didn't know what stung more in that moment, the betrayal or the fact that I wasn't even surprised. Driving back to town, my hands gripped the wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. The road blurred past, all pines and gravel and late spring haze, but my mind wasn't on the road. It was behind me, back at the cabin, in that porch scene that burned itself into my memory the way cigarette ash scars leather. Leslie. The mug. The shirt. Bryce. That unspoken familiarity between them, the quiet ease that didn't need an explanation because it had already spoken volumes. I didn't say a word the whole drive, not even to curse. I didn't yell or hit the steering wheel like some betrayed man in a movie. No. I just sat in it. Let it wash over me. Let it sink in. And the silence? That was the loudest part. Back in my driveway, I shut the truck off and just sat there. The house looked the same, modest, brick with a lawn that was more dandelions than grass. But it didn't feel the same. It hadn't for a while, though I hadn't wanted to admit it. Not until now. That's the funny thing about betrayal, it doesn't hit you all at once. It crawls. It weaves through your past and rewrites everything you thought you understood. And there, parked in front of my own home, I started remembering. Not just today, but all the small things before it. The red flags. The first came last fall around tax season, ironically enough. Leslie had insisted we switch accountants, said we needed a fresh perspective. She recommended Bryce, a guy she'd met through a mutual friend. I didn't think twice at the time. Why would I? I trusted her. I remember the first time he came by our house to drop off forms. Leslie offered him coffee. They laughed about something I didn't hear. He left too easily, and she watched him drive off for just a second too long. I noticed it then, but I buried it. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you assume the best. Even when your stomach tells you otherwise. Then there were the unexplained receipts. Spa services in towns she never mentioned visiting. One from a winery 3 counties away. I asked her once casually what the trip was for. She said she went with coworkers. Some HR bonding thing. I remember smiling, nodding, telling her she deserved a break. Meanwhile, the knot in my chest wouldn't unravel. It wasn't just the receipts. It was the shift. The way she started sleeping in later, even on her days off. The way she'd slip outside to take calls, laughing softly into her phone, then going quiet when I walked by. I told myself it was work stress. I told myself a lot of things. She started going on more solo hikes. I used to love that she had her own hobbies. Independence was something we always encouraged in each other. But this wasn't that. This was evasive. When she'd come back, she smelled different, like shampoo that wasn't hers or cologne she claimed lingered from the gym locker room. One night, I found a shirt in the laundry basket. Not mine. Not hers either. Men's size large with a brewery logo I'd never seen before. She said it was her friend Kim's boyfriend's shirt, that she borrowed it when they got caught in the rain. The lie was so specific it had to be true. Right? But even then I knew. There was the time I got up at 2 a.m. to grab a glass of water and saw her in the living room, lit only by the glow of her phone. She tucked it away fast, said she couldn't sleep. Her smile was brittle. When I asked who she was texting, she said it was her sister. But her sister lives in Denmark. 6-hour time difference. And God, I hate this part, I actually apologized. Told her I didn't mean to make her feel accused. I let her gaslight me with a gentle voice and a trembling lip. Because part of me couldn't stomach the alternative. Because facing the truth meant facing the end of the life I thought we were still building. And now, sitting in my own driveway like a stranger, I couldn't help but ask myself, had she ever actually loved me? Or was I just convenient? Steady. Predictable. The guy who'd always have the tank filled and the grass mowed and the mortgage paid. Was Bryce exciting? Was that it? Or had he simply noticed something I didn't? I stepped inside the house. It was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't realize how much of Leslie's energy used to fill it until it wasn't there. I stood in the kitchen looking at the mug rack where her favorite used to hang, chipped ceramic with a sunflower on it. It was gone now. Just like the coffee that used to be waiting for us on Sunday mornings. Just like her. I sat at the dining table and opened my laptop. The screen glowed bright in the dim room. I pulled up old photos, us at the cabin, us hiking Black Ridge, her laughing over a s'more I ruined trying to toast with a coat hanger. I couldn't even look at them. I closed the screen and leaned back, rubbing my eyes. That scene at the cabin wasn't an accident. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the final domino in a line that had been tipping for months, maybe years. I had just refused to see it. I used to think trust was the bedrock of love. That if you gave someone enough of it, pure and unfiltered, they'd feel it so deeply they'd never dare betray it. I believed that with everything in me. But trust, I've learned, isn't a shield. It's a gift. One that can be broken, quietly, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize you've been sleeping beside a stranger. A stranger who wears your shirt and drinks from your mug and shares your porch with someone who isn't you. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how long it had been since Leslie had stopped seeing me. And when exactly I stopped seeing her. 2 weeks passed. Not a word from Leslie. I didn't expect one. After what I saw at the cabin, there was no script that could undo it. No explanation creative enough to erase that moment. And honestly, I didn't want one. I didn't want a text or a voicemail or a letter soaked in regret. I wanted silence. I needed distance. So I stayed busy. I kept to my schedule, worked long hours at the shop, fixed up the canoe trailer, and mowed the lawn like it mattered. I kept things in order not because I believed in the structure anymore, but because routine was safer than reflection. Reflection had claws. Routine was just a clock. But deep down I knew that I hadn't let go. Not really. Because part of me still wondered, was I wrong? Was it possible I'd misread something? That's what betrayal does. It rewires you. Even when the evidence seems obvious, even when the flannel and the mug and the look on her face all scream one story, your brain still runs back to hope like a dog to its porch. So when Leslie texted out of nowhere and said she'd be swinging by the cabin to grab some of her old books, I didn't stop her. And when she showed up while I was at work, I didn't call to check on her. But that evening when I pulled into the gravel lot to check the canoe straps, I noticed something different. Her car was there, sure. But another one, dark gray, windows slightly tinted, was parked behind it. Bryce's car. I didn't make a sound. I parked near the trailhead instead of the cabin and walked around through the trees, taking the long way in. It was an old hunter's path, one I'd cleared years ago when we thought the place might make a good rental someday. The trail curved around the north side and came out behind the old firewood pile, just shy of the workshop. That's where I stood. I watched through a knothole in the siding, through a space no bigger than my thumb. Leslie was there. So was Bryce. She wore the same navy hoodie she used to steal from me back when the cabin was our escape. They were inside, their backs turned, but I could see enough through the kitchen window. He touched her lower back. She didn't move away. They talked in hushed voices, but her laughter carried. Familiar. An asterisk mate. Her body language, the way she leaned in, the way her hand reached for his, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an awkward reunion. This was a continuation. They moved to the fireplace next. She lit it, just like she used to. He sat on the couch, she curled next to him. Minutes passed, maybe more. I stood frozen, not because I didn't believe it, but because I finally did. I didn't knock. I didn't storm in. Instead, I walked back the way I came, took the trail camera from its mount near the lake path and shifted it, angled it just right, so the porch, the steps, and a sliver of the interior were visible. The same camera I used to monitor wildlife for the summer program. It didn't just catch deer and raccoons. With the right lens, it caught people too. That night, I didn't sleep. But the next morning, I checked the memory card. And what I saw, well, it ended everything. The footage played out in quiet, unspeaking truth. No audio. Just motion and light. 7:14 p.m. Bryce's car appears. 7:21, Leslie greets him at the steps. She smiles. He brushes her cheek with his hand. 7:26, they sit on the porch with wine. Her head tips back in laughter. His legs cross like he's been there before. 8:02, they go inside. Lights flicker. Curtains draw. 9:34, the bedroom light goes on. 10:41, it turns off. Nothing graphic. No smoking G***N. But everything was there. Two figures leaning into each other in the flickering warmth of firelight. Two people completely unbothered by the possibility of being seen because in their minds they were alone. Or they thought I wouldn't care anymore. I watched the footage twice. Then I shut the laptop, packed the card away, and sat on the porch swing out front. Just sat. Listened to the nightbirds. I wasn't angry. I thought I would be. Thought I'd punch something or break down, yell, drive to their house and throw the camera through their windshield. But I didn't. All I felt was release. Like my body had finally let go of the rope it had been pulling for months. Leslie and I were done. Not we should talk done. Not let's try counseling done. Just done. The marriage we once had, the life we tried to preserve in this half-shared cabin had been rotting for longer than I wanted to admit. Maybe it started the moment she first texted Bryce something she should have sent to me. Maybe it started before that when we both stopped listening. Whatever the case, it ended here. On a porch we built together, under a roof we patched ourselves, with a man who wore my boots once after stepping in mud. And her? She had turned our retreat into a rendezvous. Our cabin, our shared memory, had become a hotel for lies. And oddly enough, it freed me. There was no need to confront, no need to scream. No lingering what-ifs or maybe I am wrong moments. I had what I needed. Proof not just of her betrayal, but of the truth I'd been too afraid to face. This wasn't love anymore. This was a story that had reached its final page long before I ever stopped reading. When betrayal is confirmed, people expect fire. Rage. Retaliation. I know, I used to too. I used to think if someone ever did to me what Leslie did, I'd go scorched earth. I'd burn it all down, salt the soil, walk away with a middle finger raised. But when the moment actually came, all I felt was stillness. The trail cam footage had given me everything I needed, but more than that, it gave me clarity. There was nothing left to fight over. No accusations to make. No confrontations to stage. She had made her choice. And now it was my turn to make mine. But mine wouldn't be about her. It would be about me. The morning after I reviewed the footage, I drove back to the cabin. Alone. I didn't text her. Didn't call Bryce. Didn't even think of trying to schedule anything or ask for permission. That part of my life, waiting for Leslie's input, was over. What wasn't over was the cabin itself. The land. The trees. The riverbend that curved behind the eastern trail like it was always meant to be part of something bigger. That place was mine now, not just legally, but spiritually. And if I was going to heal, it had to start here. I unlocked the workshop, took a breath, and flipped on the light. Dust motes danced in the morning beams like they were waiting for me. That afternoon, I hauled my old lathe up from storage. It was heavy. The kind of weight that reminded you still had strength. The kind that made your back hurt in the good way. I mounted it near the north wall, cleared space for the wood racks, and stood back, eyeing the cabin not as a man with memories, but as a builder with plans. That night, I sat by the fire with graph paper and a pencil. No beer. No distraction. Just ideas. A summer apprenticeship program. That's what came to mind. I'd thought about it years ago, back when I used to run outdoor ed classes for the local high school. Kids today needed something real. Something tactile. A space where they could unplug, work with their hands, create something from nothing. So I decided to build it. Not for revenge, but for purpose. Within a week, I drafted a blueprint to convert the second cabin into a student bunkhouse. I sketched plans for 2 more small units, simple A-frames with cots and open porches. I ordered cedar by the bundle, paid extra for delivery. Started calling in favors from old friends with tool trailers. The transformation was slow at first, but it was steady. Every cut of wood, every post I dug into the earth, every splinter and sweat-stained shirt, each was a piece of grief I let go of. Some men drink through heartbreak. Some spiral. I rebuilt, actually. Not just the property, but myself. And then, in mid-June, something unexpected happened. Savannah showed up. Leslie's daughter from her first marriage. 19. Smart, restless, quick-tongued in the way that made adults uncomfortable but also kind of proud. She'd always been sharp. I'd known her since she was 10, back when I used to bribe her with extra marshmallows just to get her to wear a helmet on the river. She pulled into the gravel lot with a dusty backpack and an apologetic shrug. "I heard you were building something out here," she said. I was still holding a hammer. She wore a hoodie 3 sizes too big and shoes that had definitely seen better days. "Did your mom send you?" I asked, not unkindly. She made a face. "God, no. I haven't talked to her in a month. She thinks I'm at my dad's." "You're not." She shrugged. "I was. Briefly. It's asterisk, kid. You need help." I studied her. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in days. "You can stay for the week," I said. "We'll see how it goes." That week turned into a summer. Savannah had always been good with tools, but she took to the lathe like it was part of her DNA. I showed her how to shape spindles, carve handles, sand with rhythm. She learned fast. She asked better questions than most adults. She didn't just want to make things, she wanted to understand them. In the evenings, we'd sit on the porch with Coco, her request, and she'd sketch designs on scraps of wood. "You should name this place," she said one night, holding up a smudged block with a tree carved on it. "I haven't thought that far ahead," I admitted. She nodded, then grinned. "That's because you're not on the internet. Give me a week." I didn't know what she meant. But 7 days later, a blog popped up. Hands and Grain, it was called. Savannah had taken photos of the cabin, the woodshop, the trails, the half-built A-frames. She wrote entries too, funny, raw, articulate reflections about learning how to work with your hands, about screwing up and sanding too deep, about the weird peace that comes when you make something that lasts. She didn't mention her mom. Not once. That silence said more than 1,000 posts could have. As July wore on, the program grew. Not big, just a few kids from town who'd heard about it through Savannah's blog. 2 brothers from a rough patch of the county, a homeschooled girl who made jewelry from copper scraps. We ran evening fireside talks, mini lessons, and carving nights. It was messy, loud, perfect. And every now and then, I'd catch Savannah just staring out at the cabin like she couldn't believe it was real. Neither could I. What had started as a betrayal ended as a blueprint. I wasn't just building cabins. I was building trust. Not with Leslie, God no. That door was closed, but with myself. With this land. With the kids who showed up not because they had to, but because something called them. And I never once asked Savannah why she stayed. I didn't need to. She stayed because it felt like home. Because someone had handed her a chisel and said, "Try." Because for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her not as a problem to fix, but as a person with potential. That someone used to be me years ago. And now? Now I was just trying to be that guy again. By late July, the cabin no longer resembled the place Leslie once drifted in and out of. The porch had been sanded, sealed, and lined with hand-built benches that bore the initials of their makers. The bunkhouses were finished, simple, sturdy, and filled with the laughter of teens who'd found something rare, purpose. And then came the visit. It was a Saturday, the first one in weeks where we weren't battling a delivery delay or fixing a leaky spigot. Savannah was down by the river teaching grip techniques on carving knives to 2 new campers. I was oiling drawer runners in the workshop when I heard the tires crunch on the gravel outside. I knew it before I saw her. Leslie. She stepped out of the car like she owned the place or was trying to convince herself she still did. Aviators. Beige linen. Sandals that looked like they cost more than one of the bunkhouses. Her hair was swept up in a way that felt performative. Like she expected a camera crew. I didn't greet her. I kept working. She walked up the path, heels clicking against the new stones Savannah had helped lay. Brandon, she said, as if no time had passed. You've been busy. I stood, wiped my hands on a rag, and looked at her. You're not supposed to be here without notice, I said. She gave a thin smile. I figured that was more of a suggestion. I didn't respond. Her eyes darted toward the newly constructed cabins and then down toward the trail. So, you've turned it into a summer camp. Apprenticeship program, I corrected. For what? Woodcraft. Sustainability. Life. She crossed her arms. And Savannah's involved. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She asked to help. Leslie scoffed. She dropped out of college, Brandon. She's impulsive. She doesn't know what she wants. She knows she's good at this, I said. And that she's proud of what she's built. Leslie stepped closer. And you think this is healthy? Encouraging her to stay here, in the middle of nowhere, working with, what, scrap lumber and power tools? She should be figuring out her future. Getting back on track. She is on track, I said, quieter now. It's just not your track. Her jaw tightened. You don't get to parent her. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm mentoring her. There's a difference. Just then, Savannah came up the trail, laughter still clinging to her like sunlight. She froze when she saw her mom. The warmth drained from her expression instantly. Savannah, Leslie said, attempting lightness. We need to talk. Savannah didn't move. She kept her hands at her sides, stained with sawdust and cedar oil. I'm fine, she said flatly. I don't think you are, Leslie replied. This isn't a healthy environment. It's isolating. You need structure, Savannah. Direction. I have direction, she said. Leslie stepped toward her. You think hiding out here carving sticks is a plan? Savannah squared her shoulders. I've learned more here in a month than I did in 2 years of lectures and overpriced textbooks. I wake up excited. I go to sleep tired but satisfied. And for once, I don't feel like I'm performing. Leslie's face twitched. You think this is sustainable? What happens when the summer ends? Savannah didn't answer right away. She looked at me, and I gave her the space she didn't need but deserved. She took a breath and said, I'm staying through the fall. Leslie blinked. Excuse me? Savannah repeated, slower this time. I'm staying. Through the fall. Maybe longer. Absolutely not. Leslie snapped. You don't get to just disappear into the woods. This is not a life plan. It's a breakdown disguised as purpose. Savannah stepped forward now, eyes unflinching. No. What's a breakdown is pretending you're curated. Wine-soaked life is anything but lonely. What's a breakdown is living through everyone else so you never have to look at your own reflection. Leslie's mouth opened, closed. She turned to me, hoping maybe I'd step in. But I didn't. Savannah wasn't done. I love you, Mom. I always have. But I can't keep trying to win approval from someone who never really saw me. Brandon saw me. This place sees me. And I finally see myself. Leslie stood in silence. The air between us felt like glass, thin, sharp, ready to break. Finally, she exhaled through her nose. Fine. Do what you want. She turned, walked back to her car, and drove off without another word. When the dust settled behind her tires, Savannah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just stood there, stronger than I'd ever seen her. That night, she brought me a cedar plank with something carved into it. A handprint, stylized, deeply etched. Below it, her name, She said she wanted each camper to leave their mark. Literally. A handprint in wood, preserved under finish, hung in the workshop wall. "It's our emblem now," she said. "This place matters." We mounted the plaque together, and the next morning the others followed suit. One by one, each teen who came through left their mark, on wood, on the program, on each other. The cabin wasn't just a workshop anymore. It was a forge, a place where purpose was shaped, where identities weren't handed down. They were carved out by the very hands that sought them. And Leslie? She faded from relevance, not in some cruel, deliberate way, but naturally, like an echo in a room filled with louder truths. This wasn't her story anymore. It never really was. By the time the leaves started to change, Leslie and Bryce reached out with an offer. Officially, the cabin property was still joint-owned, a technicality that hadn't mattered much until now. They'd grown tired of the growing activity, the sounds of hammers and laughter, the trail of campers walking the road. Leslie described it in her email as a bit chaotic. Bryce, in his usual style, said it no longer aligned with their vision. Their vision, I guessed, involved fewer teenagers and more Chardonnay. So they offered to sell me their share. No back and forth. No legal fencing. Just a price and a contract. I didn't hesitate. I agreed the next day, wired the funds within the week. I didn't even flinch at the cost. Because now, finally, it was mine. Not halfway. Not negotiated. All mine. I stood on the porch the afternoon the sale finalized, papers still warm in my hands. Savannah joined me, a cider in her grip and a proud smudge of charcoal across her cheek. "So, now what?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we build something permanent." The weeks that followed were a blur of sawdust and spreadsheets. I submitted a formal application to convert the workshop into a certified vocational training center. Local donors stepped in. A retired teacher offered curriculum help. We built an indoor classroom annex and expanded the sleeping quarters to include winter insulation. Savannah stayed on, no longer just a student, but the program coordinator. She built schedules, ran online outreach, and handled the waitlist, which was now 36 names long. She belonged here, not as someone recovering from something, but as someone creating something entirely new. We hosted the grand opening of the expanded center under a sky so clear it felt intentional. Word had spread, neighbors, former students, families, even local press showed up. There was music, laughter, and the scent of grilled corn and cedar smoke from the fire pit. The cabins were strung with handmade lanterns. Kids ran between the trees, parents took photos beneath the emblem wall. Handprints now filled every inch of cedar. Savannah stood on a small makeshift stage and addressed the crowd. She wore jeans, her grandfather's leather belt, and a calmness I hadn't seen in her a year ago. "This place began with a mistake," she said. "But what's more important is how it grew, with honesty, hard work, and the kind of belief you can feel in your hands." Then she handed me a plaque. It was carved from oak and red. From what was taken, something was made. And it made all the difference. I didn't say anything at first. Just looked out at the crowd, faces new and old, the kind that reminded you life doesn't stop at broken. Behind them stood the cabin, once a symbol of betrayal, now a foundation of something that mattered. Leslie's last glance had once felt like the end of a chapter one didn't want to finish. But now I knew it had been the beginning of everything that came after.